Hey everyone, so today's video is going to be the beginning of another series. I know I'm doing the dungeon series right now, and then I figured I'd start a new one as well on faction wars. This is something that a couple people have asked me to do, and I think it is something that needs to be done. I will say I do not enjoy this content really, which is why I think I've been avoiding making the videos. But at the same time, it is important, so we are going to talk about that today. Today is just an intro into what Faction Wars is, maybe some just general tips and tricks, things that you should focus on, and then I'll be making individual videos based on the rotations, okay? As you see here, today we have Holy Light Empire open as well as Chrysis. For those of you not familiar with Faction Wars, this is offered in a couple different gacha games. But for this one, if you see here like Chrysis and Holy Light Empire, if you go to the index, what this means is there are specific stages within this game mode where you can only use heroes in the specific faction. Now, at first, I really liked this content. It gave you reasons to build other heroes that you normally wouldn't use for your dungeons or guild boss or guild versus environment, where those heroes might be useful for faction wars. But the problem is the, I guess, rewards that they give out for this content is not worth the effort to actually build out those heroes. So what I've done, and I think what most people would do, is they try and just use teams that make sense based on the heroes that they've already had built. And I think that is something that you should do. I don't think right now it's worth it to invest in heroes and resources just to progress in Faction Wars. Just my general opinion. So, what does Faction Wars give you? The main thing that Faction Wars gives you are these mythic ores, which are used to upgrade your gear. So if you look at some gear that I have here, we just look at like Nero, right? If you click on this piece, you can see some of this highlighted purple colors here. If you go into the enhancement category and augment, you can see that this number here, right? So on this weapon, I have 7% attack, but I also have an additional 2%. This came from the ores. Now, depending on the level of rarity of your ore, you can see down here, there's blue, purple, and then orange being the highest. You also have rare and then common, which you'll get on different stages of Faction Wars, which we'll go into. But depending on the rarity of your ore, you actually have a higher or lower range. So for this rare piece for crit damage, I can get a roll where I get either 1% all the way up to 6% additional crit damage. With the epic ore, the lowest I can roll is 3%, but the highest I can roll is 8%. And this is random, right? So you don't know what you're going to get here. And then for this one, the lowest I can roll is 5%, but the highest I can roll is 10%. These are special ores that I've gotten from Bounty. Like if you take a look at this one as well, it is tied to leveling up a weapon, right? So only a weapon can get this attack boost, but this one here does not have a limitation. So there's a bunch of different things with ores themselves. But the rolling is what's important because it can give such a high boost to your gear. It can make it even stronger. It's that important to the game. So right now you see this weapon has 15% crit damage, but because I got a roll, it went up to 20%, which is kind of like an additional roll on your gear, on your substats. So that's why Faction Wars is important, is because it gives you these mythic ores. Now, the problem with Faction Wars is even if you complete a stage, you're not guaranteed to get one of these ores, right? It's a chance. Sometimes you can just get like gear forge materials, or you can get a dungeon key, right, to play Batwolf, which is it's just frustrating that you would put in so much effort to complete a stage with really strong heroes, and then you don't even get guaranteed ores. So Faction Wars is important for that reason, but because of the randomness, it's kind of not worth the effort. The other thing that I want people to take care of with Faction Wars is, I know that these stars, you get anywhere from 1 to 3 stars for clearing this, and that plays into your one-time rewards on your progress. The thing that I want to mention here, though, is these rewards are just complete garbage. Like, they're completely irrelevant. Every once in a while you'll get one of these summon stones or whatever, but it's so hard to progress in this content and have an account leveled so high with different options of heroes that this reward versus how hard it is to complete is complete garbage. It's so frustrating whenever the game developers have stuff like this in here. It shows how out of touch they are with their own game, that it gets to levels of frustration for myself and for the rest of the player base. So the most important thing about Faction Wars is getting to a point where you can consistently farm a team or stage 100%. Getting these stars is irrelevant. You want to progress as far as you can into your Faction Wars difficulty, and then be able to consistently farm that stage. The reason why I say this, one, is because of the rarity of ore you can get. So the higher stages, the higher up you can get, like these purple epic pieces. And then on level 20, you can actually get mythic, I think that's what they call it, or legendary mythic ores, right? So the orange ores on level 20. But again, it's not guaranteed, and it's extremely hard. I have not done it on, I think, any stage except Lasir. So even then, it's really hard to achieve. But that's the one thing, right, is the higher up you go, the better ores you get. But at the same time, if it's not consistent, and this is something that people have done, I've seen them do it. If you click on multi-battle, and you fail that run, you will lose your keys. Where if you just go into battle and then you click auto, if you fail that run, you keep your key. So multi-battle is something that you really want to stay away from until you know you have a consistent team, for sure, okay? On top of that, if you do multi-battle and then you go into background, right, because you have background battle options for Faction Wars as well, if you lose those battles, you will lose your keys as well as losing your multi-battle background attempts, because for some reason you can lose those. I don't know why the developers did that, but it's a thing. So you have to be aware of that as well. So those are the main things for the introduction of Faction Wars, okay? It is important, but it is something that you should not waste a whole lot of energy on. Progress as far as you possibly can with your ores, right? With your stages to get better ores. Don't worry about the star levels. That's as basic as I can make it. On top of that, the other things that you're going to want to pay attention to are these dungeon affixes, okay? Each faction has their own specific affixes. I think there's only 3 total of like the of these first affixes. These might also have only 3 different ones as well, but maybe they mix and match amongst the factions. But we'll go over that whenever we're detailing each specific faction on its own. But this also makes the dungeon kind of harder than it should be, especially for the reward that you get. So we'll talk about that individually whenever I go over the individual factions. And then last thing that I want to talk about in this intro video is Batwolf. So Batwolf is the boss of faction challenges, and it is the one that I think you want to prioritize the most. I think being able to progress in Batwolf to the highest stage is way more important than progressing in the individual factions themselves. The reason being is the ores that you can get in Batwolf are limited to Batwolf. What I mean is if you see here in this little green icon, this is a ring icon and this is a necklace icon. You can only get ring and necklace ores in Batwolf. You can't get them anywhere else. You can get the other glyphs, for all of your other weapon pieces, like your boots, chest, helmet, and weapon. But again, you can only get ring and necklace ores in Batwolf. So extremely important to progress as far as you can with Batwolf. The other thing that you'll notice is two things here. The first one is whatever factions are available, you have the option to choose your heroes from either of those factions to make a team. So here I have Holy Light Empire and Chrysis heroes that could possibly make a viable Batwolf team. So that's nice. And then the other thing to notice is this actually has a 2-day timer on it. So it gives you the options to do Batwolf that day or the next day. So right here, as you see, it has that 2-day timer that I said. So if I don't have a viable team for Batwolf, for Chrysis, or Holy Light Empire, I can wait until the next day and try and make a team out of Lasir and Soul Plunders. And sometimes that'll be the case, because right now this Batwolf's element is water, but next week it might be fire or wood. So this week, like for example, because it's a water element, I have a viable team for Batwolf, which is, Rachel, Jocasta, Kasim, and then Shane. But next week, if it is fire, I might not have a viable team because all I have is like Nero and William, right? So in this case, I have a viable team for this week's rotation, but next week I might not. So I will wait to do Batwolf with Lasir and Soul Plunder so I can farm the highest stage possible of Batwolf. All right. That's all I have for the intro, guys. I wanted to make this short. It's kind of just a few tips and tricks, things to, associate yourself with for Faction Wars, and then we'll go into the individual factions themselves, and then we'll have an individual video on Batwolf. So it's going to be an extensive series, but hopefully it gives you enough detail where you're able to build consistent teams and farm the highest stages of Faction Wars possible. So stay tuned for those videos, guys, and thanks for checking in. All right, I'll see you later.